I'm Beck and welcome to the book recommendation tag. Thank you so much to Chloe for tagging me. I'll link her video down below. There are 15 questions on this tag, so I need to start trailblazing through them. The first one is a book that you tell people is your favorite. Simply because he is a huge author with a lot of books under his belt. I go with Brandon Sanderson when I talk about my favorite author, even though I've obviously got a lot of other favorites. And the book that I usually reach for is Mistborn or The Final Empire, which is book 1. And while this is a book that I love, I actually only gave the first book 4 stars, whereas I gave the sequel 4.5 and then the last book 5, and then I loved Stormlight so much more. But I think because this one is an easy way of people to enter the fantasy space, then I don't go with Stormlight as a leading FYI for people. Question 2 is a book that is your guilty pleasure. And I don't think I necessarily have a guilty pleasure book, but if you look at it as I'm an adult who is reading young adult and kids books, maybe that can be the guilty pleasure because I'm not the target audience. So for that, I would go with Alex Rider and Cherub because they are about child spies. And I loved this series growing up, and I've reread the first 2 Cherub books as an adult and really enjoyed them. And then I also recently discovered that Stormbreaker is available at my local library, so I've gone and put that on hold as well. I can't wait to revisit my Alex Rider loving days. So those are definitely my guilty pleasures. I feel like this question is more aimed at whether you've got a romance book or something on your reading list or your favorites shelf that you don't always talk about. Like, oh, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure because it's a bit spicy, but I'm just like, kids book and spies. I just didn't really read the brief for this question, but I hope that counts as a guilty pleasure. Question 3 is a book that everyone loved but you didn't, and I don't actually know of the accuracy of this statement that I'm about to make, but I'll say it anyway, and that is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. And this is a recent release by Brandon Sanderson. It came out earlier this year. I now have a full spoiler-free review for it on my channel if you would like to check it out. And this one has so many tropes in it that I didn't like. It felt really flat to me, and the story was just really boring, and I wasn't emotionally invested whatsoever, which is very much the antithesis that I go into with Brandon Sanderson, because obviously I said Mistborn at the start of this video, like I love his writing, but this one was just super undercut for me. So that is why I gave it 2 stars when I usually give Sanderson's 4 or 5. So that was quite disappointing. I've seen a lot of people find it okay, and even some people loved it, but some people have come out of the woodwork and said, yeah, I also gave it 1 star, I gave it 2 stars. So I feel like out of his books, it's not one of the most popular ones as it could have been. Question 4 is a book that you read the fastest. And I am not the fastest with physical reading at the moment because I've got a massive commute to and from work. So I usually just smash out audiobooks periodically. It's very rhythmic to get rid of them off my to-be read pile. However, I read this physical book in 3 days, and I read it because I got absolutely addicted to it. And it's one of my new favorite books ever. And that is Wolfsong by TJ Klune, which is an urban fantasy male-male romance featuring werewolves. Loved it so much. The found family dynamic and the pack aspect of support and vulnerability and trust is just next level in this series, and that's why I loved it so much. I think similarly, Ravensong, the sequel, I read that in a few days as well. So if it's a fantastic book, I'll smash it out in a few days. But if it's more of a slow burn story that I read over a very long period of time, case in point, City of Stairs, very different dynamics in each series. I smashed this in 3 days and gave it 5 stars. I read this in 3 weeks and gave it 5 stars. So even though I finished it very quickly, it's not always an indicator that it's going to be a favorite. Case in point. Question 5 is a book that deserves more hype, and forever and always that will be for me The Book of the Unnamed Midwife, which is my all-time favorite post-apocalyptic story ever, about a midwife who wakes up in a world where 99.9% of the population have been wiped out because of this virus. She's one of the very few women who have survived because men have a higher mortality rate in this very deadly disease than women do, and so because they survive more often, it is very much a male-ruled world now with a lot of sexual violence in it, and so she has to disguise herself as a man in order to get by, and whenever she comes across a woman, she gives her medical treatment. But she has this inner monologue and diary entries about her own identity and encountering these new people, and I think this book was really trusting and vulnerable in places where other books have been quite ostracizing. It kind of just fits with the territory of the tropes, but I like that this subverted a few, and that's why I've gone back and reread it. I think I reread it this year at the very beginning of the year. I don't know if that's going to become a habit of mine, but I would like to reread this again. More people need to read this. Question 6 is a book that is becoming a movie or a TV show, and the Percy Jackson series is being released on Disney Plus at the end of the year, just in time for Christmas. I think it's on December 20. Ideally, I would really like to reread the first 5 books in that series before I watch the TV TV show. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I would really like to do that. So I loved this series growing up. It was one of the key series that I read alongside Cherub Alex Rider. It was also Percy Jackson in there. They're like the solid trio foundation of series that I adored as a kid. I have really high hopes for this new series because Rick Riordan is directly involved in the producing of them, whereas in the movies he was not involved at all, and I think he actively left them. So I'm looking forward to the potential this series has to offer, and I really hope it delivers. Question 7 is a book that you have reread the most, and I don't know of a book outside of 2 or 3 rereads that I've done. So I'm going to say Red, White and Royal Blue for this because I just reread it at the beginning of November and absolutely adored it again, all over again. I loved it. But then I've also reread the Stormlight Archive a couple of times, and I will reread it again in the future when book 5 has a rough release date. I think for the moment the release date for book 5 is 2025, so that probably won't happen for a while. I've reread Hob once, although I've reread the first book in the Farseer trilogy now 3 times in my attempts to continue my reread. They're just slow burn stories that take me ages because they also give me a lot of emotional whiplash, so I need to be in the right place for having the energy to read them and also the attention span and the time it would take to read the pages, because I'm a very simple person, okay? If the book has short chapters, I love it. Robin Hobb's books have long chapters, so I'm a little bit in struggle city, but the struggle is worth it. So I would aim to read more Robin Hobb again. That is my goal. In terms of other rereads, I would love to get to Wolfsong, but I haven't done that yet. So yeah, I'd say just Red, White and Royal Blue and Stormlight, 2 vastly different vibes, but I'm here for both of them. Question 8 is a book from a genre that you don't typically read, and I read a memoir a couple of months ago by Tom Felton called Beyond the Wand, and this is a very short audiobook detailing his life growing up and being involved in the Harry Potter films. Obviously, Harry Potter is very nostalgic for me, so seeing his insight and how his life turned out and what was going on behind the scenes was really interesting to me, and it felt like sitting down across the table from him and just sharing a cup of tea and having him tell you his story. It was a very engaging audiobook, so I would recommend, but I don't really reach for memoirs whatsoever. I do have one on my to be read pile that I mentioned in my library TBR video, and that is Page Boy by Elliot Page. So I'd like to listen to his memoir and how that was also involved in his career as well. If you have any memoir recommendations, let me know. If there's an audiobook, even better, because it would be very unlikely that I'd read it in physical terms. Question 9 is a book that deserves all the hype it gets, and I don't have anything for this. Usually I kind of prep some of my answers, and I just kept revisiting this question and going, I don't know. In a pinch, I could probably say Legends and Lattes because it is very delightfully cozy. You go into it expecting found family vibes and coffee and snacks, and that is exactly what you get. And it's also very quick to get through as well. It has those short chapters, which I've just said that I love. So maybe this one, because so many people have read it and really enjoyed it, but if you're not into cozy fantasy, you'd probably find it boring, so it could go either way. Question 10 is a book that you usually give when asked for a recommendation, and a lot of people in my real life know that I've got a YouTube channel, and so they come to me with book questions. They're like, what do I read? And then they don't give me any context, like, oh, I like X and Y in these genres. And I'm like, I have no idea what to recommend you. So a go-to fantasy book that I usually recommend is Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, because within the first 5 to 7 pages, it really sets up the tone. It's got a Three Musketeers kind of vibe to it, which is very banter-centric. And there are these characters who have left their previous lives working under the king because he was killed. And now they're trying to slap this life together between mercenary jobs that they're hired on for. And so because they've got this history and this loyalty and this mission, now they're in this world where they don't have any plans anymore. And so it's kind of funny to see them try and set boundaries of, this is what I need to do, this is how we need to approach this thing, and then they just get set up by other people because everyone hates their band, which are like traveling legal practitioners basically, and they treat them like a joke. So it's already a very charged series. It starts off setting up the characters and then having an immediate action scene, so already you've got emotional investment and then immediate action to get you involved. So it's a series I really loved, and people can tell when I talk about it, and that's why I usually recommend it. It's also a fantasy book that is not too long either, and the audiobooks are great. So that is really my go-to. I probably also now start recommending Fourth Wing as a book that people who aren't really big readers should start reading, because Rebecca Yarros is a romance writer, but she also wrote this fantasy book. And because it's got such popularity and traction behind it, I think there's now going to be a screen adaptation of it or something, which seems very quick to me. But because it's got such traction already, people generally recognize the cover or they've heard of it before. So Fourth Wing and Traitor's Blade are my two go-tos. Question 11 is a book that has your favorite characters. One of my favorite characters that I have remembered for a literal decade, maybe even longer, is Carson from the Live Ship Traders series or the Rainwild series. He is a character that just brings absolute calm and certainty, and he feels like a mentor figure. He's just got this presence that is very receptive, and I love that about his character. I haven't read these books in such a long time, and he still sticks as like a real figure in my head, which is how succinctly Robin Hobb wrote him. Additionally, Thomas in the Wolfsong series is the head of the Bennett family, and Ox is the boy who lives across the road, and it's from his perspective. But his father was quite abusive to him and his mother, and his father left very early on in the book. And because Ox is feeling very unmoored, he makes friends with the Bennett family and they kind of bring him in, and Thomas becomes almost like his surrogate father. He's this mentor figure, but he leads through being vulnerable and open. And because he's got that vulnerability and openness, people tend to trust him and he supports them. I think that's a very strong leader to me. You don't have to tell people do this and do that in order to lead. You have to interpret what they're telling you. And I love Thomas for doing that. Question 12 is a book that you feel like you want to live in. And I would probably say Bright Falls, which is in the Delilah Green Doesn't Care series. I think this would be a fantastic small town to live in and enjoy. All of the shenanigans going on with this group of friends would be amazing to be a part of as well. Just the girl group support would be awesome. And I love this found family dynamic. This book recently came out at the end of October. I've been anticipating it for months and I'm so excited about it. Actually, talking about rereads from earlier, I would probably want to reread the Delilah Green series or the Bright Falls series. Sorry, if this doesn't land me another 5-star read, I'm going to be very upset. Question 13 is a book that you thought you would hate but ended up loving. And I wouldn't go as far as saying loving, but I thought I would just not enjoy this book, and then I ended up finding it okay. So that is like, instead of hate and love, it's kind of like middle. I fell in the middle for this one, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. I've been very skeptical with Brandon's Kickstarters because I was worried that after reading the synopses of them as they've been releasing, I wouldn't be loving them so much. But Tress I actually gave 3.5, and even though it has a fairy tale note to it and a whimsical tone, which is not usually what I like, I generally avoid fairy tale stories, I think this was enjoyable. It had a decent moral. Sometimes the humor just was not my thing, but I could get past it in terms of the story progression in the second half. So I finished it, I enjoyed it, but would I have gone out and bought it if I'd known what it was about? Unlikely. Now, for the sake of convenience, I'm going to combine questions 14 and 15. So question 14 is a book that made you cry, and question 15 is a book that you wish you could read for the first time, and for both of that answer is going to be Robin Hobb. I really wish that I could read all of them for the first time because it's been so long, I feel like I kind of am reading them almost for the first time. There is still key pieces of things I remember, but even in my recent reread of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is the first book in her Farseer trilogy, I was like, this is a major thing that happened, and I completely forgot that this piece was part of it. So there's still things that I don't clearly remember about the series, and that's probably because I'm 30 now and I read them when I was 15. So maybe I could read them for the first time. That's really exciting to me. I can't wait to get back into all of these books. But yes, anyway, that is the end of this book recommendations tag. Thank you again so much to Chloe for tagging me. If anyone else wants to do this tag, consider yourself tagged. Thank you again so much for watching this video. Come and chat to me down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.